Hi, guys. Welcome to A Little Help for Our Friends, a podcast for people with loved ones struggling with mental health. Welcome back, little helpers. Today, I'm going to be talking about a truly scary topic, which is how do you respond to self harm or suicidal crises in teens and young adults? So, today, my good friend and colleague, Dr. Marcus Rodriguez, who is a uh, adolescent and family dialectical behavior therapy therapist. Marcus and I did a webinar for clinicians about responding to different kinds of self harm crises in kids ages, generally 10 up till 20. And it was such a good webinar. I learned so much from Marcus, and also just talking about the topic, it definitely resonated with a lot of people who were struggling knowing what to do when it comes to this particular situation where someone as young as 10, 11, 12 comes to you. Maybe you're a clinician, a parent, educator, or someone who just cares for youth, and that kid tells you, I'm thinking about hurting myself. I'm thinking about killing myself. I can't imagine anything scarier. And so we went deep into the belly of the beast, which is, what do you do? What do you actually say? What is the right way to respond to something so scary like that? I'll say up front that I'm basically going to give you a lot of the webinar right now. I'm going to talk through the different elements that we covered, which is why this is such a problem, how to assess suicide or self-harm urges, and principles to actually respond in healthy ways and really helpful ways, and what families can do, bringing in the family system. So those are the different parts of the webinar. And I will say upfront that a lot of this material was I got from Marcus. So if you're in California and if you have an adolescent or young adult, or even you're a family who is struggling with someone who is suicidal or hurts themselves, you can reach out to Dr. Marcus Rodriguez, and his clinic is called the Youth and Family Institute. So if you're in California, talk to him. I'll leave the website in the show notes. And if you are like a parent or family member, partner, another loved one of someone who is suicidal or self-harms, that's my area. So you can learn more about Kulamind, Kulamind. That's my program where I coach family members on how to actually respond to really intense mental health crises like this. So for the family, I'll do the coaching, and Mark is going to do the therapy with the youth. So why even bring up this topic? Full disclosure, I'm an adult therapist. I work with adults, and that's my main experience. But I am talking to a lot of adults who have teens, adolescents, youth in their life that are struggling. I'll just say teens. I was go back and forth between youth and young adults. I'll just say teens. And when I mean teens, I also include people up until their early 20s, because I feel like now adolescence has extended to a lot longer than we had before. So the reason why we talked about this topic, is working with young adults and teens scarier than it used to be. Before the pandemic, I think that you might have a few kids who are going through something really difficult, who suicidal or self-harm. I know that when I look back on my childhood and I look at my adolescent years, I had a number of friends who I actually myself cut a little bit when I was in high school and I was dealing with a lot of stressful situations with my mom. But I did know several of my really good friends who either hurt themselves in some way, like cutting or hitting themselves, really common. Burning or scratching. I don't know anyone who did that, but burning or scratching is one form of self harm. And there were a few of my really good friends who, tried to take their own life, took a bottle of pills and took, a bottle of alcohol and ended up in the emergency room. Um, I didn't realize just how high pressured my my background was now that I'm taking my son to a different uh looking at different schools and hearing about my schools and how intense and pressure cookery they were. I was like, oh, I was in a really intense, stressful environment. So there were a lot of kids that I knew, a lot of good friends who struggle with these kind of things. But talking to administrators, educators, clinicians, I mean, it just seems like the youth, the teens, adolescents, like kids that were too young to be even thinking about this. They should be having fun, but instead they are thinking about hurting themselves. It's awful. It feels like high crisis right now. It feels like young people aren't able to cope with a lot of the stressors of the world. Even going to school terrifies them, right? So there's just like so much pain that they don't know how to deal with. Even just the stats that we listed out, it's like 1 in 5 US high school students seriously considered suicide in the past year. Nearly 1 in 10 reported a suicide attempt. And suicide remains one of the leading causes of death in adolescents and young adults. So it just feels scarier. And if part of your life, daily life or work involves young people, you will come across this. It almost seems pretty likely that you have dealt with this already if you're listening to this. Um, I've talked in this podcast about what I think it could be contributors. I mean, everyone wants to blame social media. Everyone wants to go, well, the kids are struggling because of social media. Not no, but I think that is one symptom of the problem. We forget that a lot of these kids now who are teens had a significant part of their childhood in COVID, right? And yeah, we might look back on it like we stayed inside for a while, but if you don't remember the terror in the beginning, the fear that if you go outside or stand too close to someone, you can kill them. And I think existentially it's scary for a kid to see the world shut down. Right? There's so much of teen and young adult life that is about experimenting and doing stupid things and acting out, rebelling, finding yourself. And that all makes sense when the overarching structure is solid. There's a foundation of safety. You have a family who will be there to help you and love you and walk you through the hard times. There will be a world with rules and expectations. And if you go to school and go to work, everything will be fine. And then all those assumptions were gone, right? Like suddenly the world can stop and you're doing, school online and we didn't know what was going to happen. So I do think that COVID had a major effect on youth mental health and really pulled them away from being able to cope with a lot of painful things. So this is just something that is more of a problem now than ever. So if you are in contact with teens and you're like, why is this so hard? I think I think there's a real reason for that and validating that for you. I will say that thinking about helping and supporting teens who are struggling with suicidal thoughts or self-harm, full disclosure, my training as an adult clinical psychologist, I assume that, teens are just young, small adults, that they probably have less regulation, so they don't have as many coping skills, they don't have wisdom, and that's the difference. So that couldn't be further from the truth. Teens and adolescents are not just small adults, they have their own needs, they have their own considerations. Yes, all the things that I said, they don't have a fully formed prefrontal cortex, so they don't have the same kind of regulation skills that we do, getting through hard times and trying to figure our way out. But we can't just think, oh, it's like helping an adult, except smaller or um, easier. Definitely not. I'll point out four major differences, four things to really think about. If you're a clinician or a teacher or you have teens, here are four things to wrap your head around about how it's different than working with adults, how teen suicide and self-harm can be very different. One is that when you help an adult with suicidal thoughts of self-harm, you might be talking about helping an individual, right? You work with one person, you ask them what kind of coping skills they have. You help one person. I actually argue that even when you're an adult, it's not just one person, but it really is a critical part of treating and supporting teens. It's like thinking about, I'm treating a family system, I'm treating a community, I'm treating a support network around this teen. Maybe the teen isn't even the biggest problem. Maybe it's their parents' marriage. Maybe it's the school environment that's just really not supportive, right? So, because they're so housed and so interconnected with their social environment, it's you have to think about, how do I treat a family system, not just how do I treat an individual. And I say treat a lot with this talk, but I will, you may not be a clinician, you may not be a therapist, but I'm saying if you are in a position of helping a teen, so we'll say helping or treating. So the first one is treating the family system. The second is that it is more normal to hear shutdown, uh, ambivalence, or they might not give you much. So, and I was talking to Marcus about this. It's so interesting that teens and adolescents they don't really have a lot of control of their lives. Right? They're sent to a school. They are told when to go where. We limit how much screen time they have, right? So they're a lot of their lives are not their own. And um, a lot of the control they have is withdraw, right? So that if they want to make sure they could trust you before sharing, or control how they're being treated, or um, their relationship to you and what you do, they might say, I don't know, or yeah, I don't really care, or maybe. Like, they give you non-answers. So that's their way of just, protecting themselves, is to be kind of vague. But you should expect that, and you should expect that resistance or not openly sharing is the norm. They're trying to figure out who they can trust and how. And they're just not going to be as clear about, yes, I've had thoughts of hurting myself. I'm really scared. I really need help. I'm at risk of harming myself. Adults might be able to, because they have a little bit more coping skills and communication, but it is more normal for kids not to say that outright. So if you see a kid who is not doing well, you're worried about their well-being, they've hit some hard times, and there's a risk, I would not take the I don't know as a sign that there is no risk. I would take that as a point to start assessing more, to be open and to listen more. That's the start of the conversation. So I wouldn't confuse the I don't know or I don't care with I'm fine. They might even say I'm fine. They might not be fine. So expect ambivalence and vague answers from teens. The third consideration is the research shows that adolescents and teens are very high at risk for self-harm and suicide, but especially because they have higher impulsivity, meaning that they will, without much forethought or planning, they'll jump to doing something. They'll jump to a coping skill, which could be hitting themselves, hurting themselves, right? They might do things that are, dangerous. So knowing that research, knowing that my teens are a lot more impulsive, keeping the environment safe is super critical. And what I mean by that is making sure that someone is physically there with them, making sure that what's called method restriction, which is locking up those guns, getting rid of any weapons or sharp things, and um, medications, pills, anything that could be dangerous. If you are, unsure or scared for their safety, I would make sure the environment is safe first. Um, Not first, but one of the major things to think about. And then four, it's interesting that this was this was cited as a major difference between teens and adults who are suicidal, but I really don't agree. But most crises are interpersonal in nature. So breakups, being bullied, being cyberbullied. If you've seen Adolescence on Netflix, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Friendship conflict, friendship drama, feeling lonely, feeling like you don't fit in, not getting into a group or some kind of social community that you wanted. Those are all major triggers of intense pain in teens. And it's easy to, as an adult to think, oh, have so many problems. I gotta make a living and I gotta support everyone. And, they haven't paid taxes. Like my teen is, obsessed over their breakup. That might be really missing the point because it is a major trigger of a lot of pain. It's a big deal for teens to go through interpersonal rupture or pain or drama. It might seem like a trivial small problem to us adults, which I actually don't think is true. I think that a lot of our triggers are interpersonal in nature, but with teens, they are developing their identity. They are individuating. They're breaking away from their family life and they're making new attachments. They're defining themselves with their social circle, right? We all know that we all have heard like teens care about being popular and belonging, fitting in. So not doing that is not just, oh, no big deal. It's a big deal for them. It's earth shattering. It could be like an existential crisis if you have a bad breakup. So when teens go through that, don't minimize it. Really don't, invalidate and say like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. It's just a dumb boy. Who cares? You'll date so many other ones. But take it seriously and know that this is a trigger. This is like those interpersonal ruptures are a trigger of a lot of serious and dangerous behavior. So those are the four major differences. I'm sure there's many more, but treating a family system, expecting ambivalence or vague answers, um, keeping in mind that they're impulsive, so keeping the environment safe, and knowing that interpersonal problems are a big trigger. And so when you put all of these together, we got to think about helping the support system be part of the safety plan instead of, oh, there's one teen with a problem, right? There is a system, there's a family with a problem. So we gotta loop in all of that. I'm going to talk about assessment, how to assess and how to actually find out if your teen, young adult is actually thinking of hurting themselves. I'll say up front that saves lives to ask someone if they're thinking of killing themselves. Asking directly about self-harm and suicide saves lives. There are so many myths about that. It's such a scary topic to bring up that even me, who's had a lot of training, who is very comfortable with talking about this, if I get a sense of, oh no, my patient or someone is maybe they're suicidal, like I get scared to bring up that topic. Part of it is I don't want to hear it because it's so painful and scary. And then it might mean you have to do certain things. You have to call someone. You have to, right? You're scared of how it might, interfere with your relationship. But not asking is more dangerous than asking. It does not plant the idea in their head if they're thinking about it, they will tell you, and it's not something that you just created. So ask. If you are a loved one, if you are a sibling or a family member, you could say, hey, actually, I'm jumping right into it, but I'll list out that the three major things to assess, maybe four, I'll say four, are one, are they thinking of hurting or killing themselves? Two, do they have a plan, like an idea of how they would do it? Three, do they have access to the means right now about that would be dangerous and put them at risk? And four would be intent. Do they actually think about doing this and plan to do it, and not just passive thoughts? Those are the top things to really parse apart, right? And I'm not saying you have to you have to list these out, but and ask them one by one, but these are the things to to look out for. You could ask questions like, for one, are they thinking of hurting or killing themselves? The questions I like to ask are this pain has been so big. Like, you sound so overwhelmed, and I get it. Things have been really hard. I just want to be sure, and I just want to understand. Has the pain been so bad that you've thought about death or taking your own life? Tell me more about those thoughts. When's the last time you had them, right? So really asking directly about thoughts of death or hurting themselves. And then you could ask, okay, if someone says yes, you say, okay, do you think about how you would do it? Do you ever plan? Do you ever take steps to plan or make moves towards making it happen? And then access to means. So it's like, okay, well, is there anything around you that can be dangerous? Like, how can we keep you safe? Right. Is there anything, like, especially if they tell you the method or plan, like if they're saying, I'm thinking of taking pills, then you say, okay, are there pills in the house? Like, let's walk through together how to get that away from you, so we can just really understand and cope with your pain first. Other things to pay attention to is if they have a history of self-harm or suicide attempts, that really increases the risk a lot. So if you get asked them, have you ever done this before? Have you ever hurt yourself? And then you can, especially if it's more recent, that brings up the risk too. And understanding protective factors, which is like, what are your reasons to live? What actually helps you get through these moments? When you've had these thoughts, what helps you feel better? What is something that you look forward to? So I'm not going to give a whole rundown of like how to assess for suicidality, but those are the major parts. At least you could ask those questions just as I said it, or you could weave that into a conversation, right? You could talk about, like, when the pain is so big, like, do you think about how you feel better? Or if they talk about death, or they think about death, you'd be like, what does that mean to you? What do you think that would solve? Like, so just have these kind of open conversations to really understand if they were having these thoughts and feelings. So then once you assess and they say, yes, I'm thinking about it. If they are an immediate crisis, like they're like, I've thought about killing myself. I thought about how, and I'm going to do it. That is high risk. Right? I'll just say that, like, if there's intent, a plan, and thoughts, that is high risk. Call someone. Call 988, the crisis line in the US, 911. I know that's tricky. There is a lot of controversy about calling the police because it could be even more traumatic. It could be very traumatic to go in the hospital. So I definitely always recommend 988, the crisis line. If they have a therapist, you alert the therapist, or you take them to the emergency room. Yes, I know that's going to be tough. That's no one's going to like that. They're going to be angry. It's unpleasant to be in the hospital. But if there is like a risk, like someone is at high risk like this, that is a way to go to keep them safe. You would prefer for them to be angry and bummed out eating the gross hospital food than seriously injured, right? So I'll say that, especially if you're, listening to this and you're like, I have had absolutely no training in handling of suicidality. Better safe than sorry. If it's not imminent risk, if it's not like, if it's like thoughts of death or hurting yourself, um, also self harm doesn't necessarily have to be suicidal. Some people hurt themselves and don't have any plan to kill themselves and take their own life. I'm gonna make that distinction really clear. Non suicidal self injury is a thing, and it's more common than you think. A lot of the time is to express how much pain they're in or to cope with the pain in some way. Like some people will create physical pain um, to themselves because it distracts them or takes or externalizes the pain, right? It's a way of coping, but they don't think I want to die. So being really clear and really asking for that. But Mark has really taught me this. It's really understand where they're coming from, really understand their pain, talk to them. There's so much top down, even as I'm thinking about if my son, who's, if he turns 13 and he tells me that he's thinking of jumping off the building, I would be, I would be in such terror that I would just be like, don't do it. I would try to squash their feeling, try to make them feel better and, try to make them safe. Like I would try to get hands on and stop the problem, right? I would be so scared. However, there is so much of that done to kids. There's so much top down, controlling, doing, forcing them, making them do this, making them do that, right? We want to keep them safe, so we know better. And there's a lot of doing things to them instead of with them. So, but it goes a long way. I mean, Marcus was saying this, and I know from my own experience that it goes a long way to try to understand their experience and not just telling them what to do, right? Actually, we did a podcast episode with Dr. Cam, the teen translator, a couple of episodes ago, and she said the same thing under not crisis situations. But we often try to make teens do stuff. Like we tell them go to school, we tell them do this and tell them that, give them advice, give them solutions. But what they're really looking for is someone to understand them and help them feel heard and get to know them as a person. So this approach, you could take the approach of really understanding what this teen is struggling with. What pain is so great, so big, that hurting themselves or taking their own life seems like the only solution. They might not even be able to articulate that, but no one just jumps right to that, right? There's usually so much pain and a lack of feeling. There's a lack of feeling like that anything can help, and so it's a desperate measure, right? Killing yourself is a sign of desperation. So understanding how they got there, how they got so desperate, that would be the key. That's the key principle. And I love Marcus's script. I'll just read it out loud. He says to think about this. Think about transmitting this message to this teen, this adolescent that's struggling. I'm not here to keep you alive just to prolong your pain. I want to understand the problem so we can solve it together. Everything else, locking up the weapons, practicing skills, getting people to help, it's all in service of that. It's all in service of, I want to be able to understand the problem so we can work on it together. Think about it as I said before, promoting and keeping a teen safe is about dealing with the family system. How do you make the family safe? So instead of thinking you're a kid and you are thinking of killing yourself and you have this problem and you need to do something about it, it's like, how can we put our heads together and shoulder this burden together? You feel like this pain, this problem is so overwhelming. You can't think of anything else that can help. Well, let me in and help you. Let's talk about it. Let's figure it out together. You're not alone. So, in service of that, the first step is understanding the problem and validating. Again, this is all what Marcus taught me today. And I've talked about this on this podcast over and over again, but it was just such a good reminder. Instead of thinking if I'm picturing like if my 13-year-old son, he's 3 right now, but if his 13-year-old son said, I'm going to hurt myself, I immediately will go to, no, don't do that. How do you make it, how can we make you feel better? What do you want to do? What can I, right? Like I'm even getting anxious just talking about it, but I would rush to try to fix it. But that gives a message that we got to get rid of this pain right away. We got to solve this, get rid of this, go bye-bye. I don't want this, right? No, no, no. It's actually a lot of suppression. Instead, slow down and take a moment to try to understand. How did they get here? What is the most painful? I'm going to read out Marcus's script that he gave me. I want to understand what's causing you so much pain so that I can maybe help you find some way through it, some relief. I don't want to keep you alive and leave you stuck in the same level of pain. Right? So it's like, I want to understand this pain. The questions you could ask are, wow, so you're thinking of hurting yourself? What is going on right now? What brought this up? When did you first start feeling this? What felt so overwhelming that you just can't handle it? That you felt like you just can't handle it? What was that like? Tell me more. What else are you feeling? What else made this so hard for you, right? What have you tried? What have you done to try to fix it? Right? And just talk to them, ask questions, ask clarifying questions. This is the place where I see loved ones struggle because they are scared of the potential trauma of someone you love hurting themselves. So you jump in with solutions. Oh, you don't worry about this. Go to your therapist. That's not a big deal. You can handle it. Don't worry about it. Oh, you've been graded tests before. Why should this be a problem, right? You go into jumping to solutions and not saying, could be, especially because we as an adult, we are adults think that we know better, especially if it's your kid or someone that you feel like you know, and you're like, oh, they were going through a breakup. I've been through breakups. I know how to handle it. I can tell them how to handle it. No, it's not your job to impose your wisdom onto them, right? If they ask for it, of course, and you might know that, okay, they could get through this. They have the skills. They're capable. They could get through this, but they don't know that, right? They would love to have someone actually listen and listen fully. So ask questions. If you don't know, ask. Try to slow down. And I like to do this. As a therapist, I like when I'm trying to understand a problem and trying to like really get into someone's world and understand what the pain is. I like to picture it. I'm more of a visual person, so I like to almost picture like a movie, like what happened and where is the pain and why is it so big and what else is really painful about it and why what does that mean for their future, right? I just like to picture it. So if you feel like you're a visual person and you're trying to picture it or at least like analyze this problem in its full, if there's any holes or gaps, fill it with a question. If you're like, wait a minute, okay, you broke up with your boyfriend and then a couple days go by and then you're thinking of hurting yourself. Walk me through that. How did you go from breakup to this feeling? What happened in those days? What was that like? What did that feel like? Wait. Okay, how long was that? 2 hours? Where were you? Right? Just to flesh it out in your mind, really understand the problem. And then validate. Validation doesn't mean you're agreeing or just cheerleading. It's not like, I feel like, especially online, validation is kind of this used as saying like confirm or approve. Like, I want to be validated. Validate here just means making sense of their feelings, telling them that it's legitimate to feel the way they're feeling, and then expressing that to them. Oh, okay, this relationship felt like your everything. It felt like you finally had a home. It finally understood who you were. You finally felt cool. You finally felt like you had a group, and now it's all gone in a second. Oh, that would be so overwhelming. I totally get this is the validation part. I totally get why you'd be in so much pain. You don't have to validate the suicide or self-harm as a coping mechanism, right? You don't have to be like, yeah, it makes sense that you would hurt yourself or, yeah, you should take your own life. Obviously, don't do that, but don't be afraid of validating the feelings, even if you're afraid of it leads to this kind of dangerous behavior. You're like, that makes sense that you're feeling so much pain. Not, don't worry about it, don't feel that pain, but like, and you don't have to say, okay, it makes sense why you're drinking and hurting yourself. Be like, I get that you feel this much pain, and I get why this would feel like so overwhelming and you feel so alone in it that you don't know how else to cope. You don't know how else to get through this moment, right? Validate. And then Marcus, and I think I've also coached my cool online clients in a similar way. You want to balance two things about your role. Your role as whatever clinician, loved one, is that you want to share the load. You want to stand next to them and see the problem and work through the problem together. At the same time, you're going to keep them safe, right? You want to help them stay safe. So there's the dealing with the problem that led to the pain, sharing and validating that emotion, and also, hey, let's prevent coping with it in a way that is going to be dangerous. So it's a tricky balance there, of course, because I think that a lot of people, especially with teens, it's so hard to get their trust that I would be afraid of like, oh, hey, like, let me help you. Let's talk about the suicidality. But then doing all these things to keep them safe or, taking them somewhere, calling someone would make me seem like I'm not on their side. Right. So having to balance like, I gotta get them to trust me, and also I keep them safe. And then sometimes those feel like two different things, but if you can balance both. So instead of thinking, I'm here to stop you from hurting yourself, I'm here to stop your suicidality, which you are, but instead of fighting against something that they're doing, work with them to be like, okay, I'm here as an ally and as your support against your problem, the thing that is making you feel so upset. Right? I'm trying to figure. I'll sit with you and think about and be with you in dealing with this breakup that is so painful that you're thinking about hurting yourself. Right? So not like, hey, I'm trying to get you to stop hurting yourself. It's, hey, I'm here to sit next to you, really understand the problem with you, and to work together to think of another solution, another way to get through this. I love that Marcus framed it this way. You could say, I know that hitting yourself or thinking about suicide is not the problem. It is your solution to the overwhelming pain you're going through. Right? So, or feeling helpless, or feeling angry, or feeling lonely, or ashamed. And, as I'm saying this goes with all different kinds of coping mechanisms. People who are doing drugs, alcohol, risky stuff, all the things that you're like, that's a problem. Stop doing that. The more you fight against it, the more the other person is going to protect it, right? Because they're like, because of polarizing, it's pitting you two together. It's like, I'm going to stop this thing that you have felt like it is your way out or your solution. They feel like drugs, suicide, self-harm, whatever, is a solution to the problem. Not a great one, but it is the one that they've feel like will be helpful. And then you're like, no, I'm going to stop this and leave you with all that pain. Instead, be like, no, okay, I understand that this is a coping mechanism. This is a way to cope, but this pain is the problem, right? So say, I want to understand. I want to help you with this. At least I want to share the load with you if possible. You could even say, like, I'm scared. I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm not sure exactly how to help yet, but I can guarantee that I can try. So then how do you balance that? Like, I'm on your side with, I'm going to stop you from hurting yourself. Um, the way Marcus described it is a similar way that I tell coal mine clients, which is, or, how I do it myself, which is being genuine about the way you're feeling, right? If you're like, I think that some people assume that they have to be tough and be like, yeah, it's okay. I got this. I could fix this. And then hide or suppress what they're feeling, which is probably terror, probably even anger. How could this kid be doing this dangerous thing? That's so stupid. And it was so painful and so destructive. Why did they do that? So they might think, oh, I have to shut down all my feelings and just, but you could be genuine and say, hey, I'm here. I'm trying to understand this with you. I want to work on this problem with you. But if you're saying that you are going to take a bottle of pills and you say that it's in the bathroom, I'm too scared. That's too scary. I can't even think. I can't. That is really. I can't even focus on this problem because I'm so scared of what might happen about your safety. So, can we figure out how to right now get through this moment? What can make us a little bit safer? Can we, I love that Marcus says, can we put some distance between you and it while staying on the phone or being with me? Um, and just be really direct, like, okay, uh, please step off the ledge. You got to step off the ledge. We got to take these pills and we got to lock them up or give it to someone else who could keep them safe. Um, you have to pull over in the car. I can't talk to you about this breakup when I'm too scared that you're going to crash this car. Please pull over right now so we can talk about it. Right? It's a way to say, and I actually what I've been telling people lately is interestingly not just about them being harmful to themselves, but being abusive to you or being harmful to you, right? Like, if we're not dealing with like the self-harm and suicide, it's someone who's screaming, someone's calling you names like, you're the worst mother, I hate you, and you blah, blah, blah. And then, but they're also asking for, to be heard and to have like their loved one recognize their pain, and they're being mean, like you should be ashamed, you're an asshole, blah, blah, blah. I say it this way, like it's almost, you could think of it as drawing boundaries, or you could be genuine to say, like, I really want to hear you. I really want to understand. I want to help you through this. I don't want you to feel alone. And I get that you feel really unheard right now. So I really want to hear about your experience. I'm having a hard time doing that when you're yelling at me like this, when you're calling me an asshole, because I just get upset, I get defensive, and then I'm not even there with you. So it's not really working. Can we pause that? Like, I get that you're angry. And if the name calling keeps happening, I'm going to walk away for a second and we could, just kind of take a walk or, chill out for a second. And then we could try talking again, because I cannot focus if I feel attacked like this. Right. So you could frame, you could frame the boundary, the saying no to the danger, the problem behavior, as a way to really focus on the problem at hand. All right. And then in dialectical behavior therapy, which is what Marcus and I both studied, there's all sorts of skills that help people get through the moment. These are all often called distress tolerance skills, which is in a moment of crisis, what is a way to get through that moment without making it worse? You might not feel better. It might not fix the problem, but can it get you through 10 more minutes? Can it let you ride out the worst burst of fear and anger So you get a little bit of relief. You can breathe a little bit and get a little clarity. Like, can it buy you some time, right? I also like that a lot of DBT skills like these change your body chemistry. It's more about working on your body and soothing your body, because when people feel, oh, I was in so much pain, I thought hurting myself was the only way to make myself feel better, but I could stick my face in ice and I also feel better. Whoa, I have more control over my inner life. I can actually do something about this. It gives a sense of agency. So, I mean, I've talked about stress tolerance skills on this podcast before. You could look this up, but there are some very simple skills. Like, one is intense exercise, jumping jacks, right? Rev up the body, and then it'll kick in the parasympathetic nervous system. One of my favorites is ice in the face, taking a bowl of water, filling it up with ice and water, and then sticking your face in it, holding your breath, sticking your face in it for as long as you can, as long as it's safe, or an ice pack over your forehead. I'm not going to go deep into this. And like, there's other breathing skills, meditation. It could be just walking or journaling or any kind of coping skills, which is just something to do to get through the moment. I like watching horror movies when I'm really, like my distress tolerance is watching horror movies. I know it's weird, but it works. It distracts me. It makes me feel like I'm delving into the darkness without like, well, still allowing time to go by. And then I can actually like channel it into something other than, you know, a dumb move that what I regret later. So thinking of a way to cope in those moments, and you could walk through it with the teen together with your teen. You could both put your face in a bowl of ice. You can both do jumping jacks. You could all go for a run, sprint for 5 minutes. Do it with them. And if and that's on a magic bullet, right? You run once, it's not going to get rid of everything, but maybe you run and then you put your face in ice water. Maybe you do some journaling after that. Maybe you put on a movie after that. Um, and do something soothing for your body, wrap up in a blanket and watch something stupid on the TV. And maybe all of those coping skills could get you through the moment, right? And also, it's implicitly showing that the teen that you're there with them, right? Not just like, hey, go run, right? You could do that too, but it is, let's run together. Let's do this together. You're not alone. I will do this with you. Even if it's just very silly stuff, like you end up laughing, you end up feeling dumb, you get into racing or something like that. It's physically moving with them to get through the moment. And then another piece of this is you don't do this alone, right? If you are the only one alone, okay. But if you can loop in a best friend, loop in your partner, loop in a neighbor, someone who can just be there, be a body double, be present, especially if you're not physically there, right? Figure out who can help. It might be awkward, but you don't even have to tell them everything. You just be like, hey, my teen is like really just bummed out. Can you just like sit in the living room with them, watch some TV with them, right? Just so sharing the burden here. And then if they're feeling better, you don't have to, don't just clock off and be like, okay, good. Not worried about that. They might feel pain again. They might think about this again, right? So check in and think of a plan moving forward. Get a commitment. Like say, okay, not telling them, but just saying, hey, okay, so let's make a plan for how to actually get through the night until we could talk to your therapist, or we can, figure this out together, or we can figure out other solutions. But what can we do to actually get through this moment again for the rest of the night, right? If we get through this, we could really address the problem together. So what can keep you safe for the night? What could keep us safe for the night? And then checking in, troubleshoot, say, what is going to get in the way of that plan, right? Like, it is so tempting to be like, okay, got it. Like they're all good. We figured it out. But really plan for what can go wrong? Like, okay, are you going to forget? Let's write it down. You feel embarrassed? Okay, let's talk about how you want to talk about this with other people. All right. So, um, even if it's like, it might be up to the level of, can you check in with me every few minutes or every hour or something like that? And, just can we actually, figure out a way to not just set the plan and leave it, but set the plan and really make sure that we're, you know, executing, we're actually doing it. So, and then another piece of that is then assess and follow up, right? Like, okay, how are you feeling now? What are your urges to hurt yourself? Let's figure out like just the next steps, how to get through the next moment. Okay, so it's like an ongoing process for dealing with feeling that intense pain. It's not like they're going to feel better and it's done. Now, this is the part I love, is making sure that we have a family system, treating the family system. So I was just talking as though it's just one person, you and the teen. But then we got to think about, how can I help the family create safety, right? I hear this in Cool of Mind a lot, where people are like, my relationship with my son, my relationship with my daughter, I'm the only one who could help them. I'm usually running in and fixing them, right? And then there's other people. There's a dad, there's a brother, there's like all these other people in the mix that are worried and scared or angry, or, there's a whole thing going on. And that feels overwhelming for everyone involved. And maybe that's even the problem, right? That they're so fractured. So the principle I like to think about is, how can we get all on the same page with a plan together? And what do I do in that plan? What does the brother do in that plan? What does the father do? Like, what situation are we going to call emergency services, or how are we going to contact the clinician, right? It's like, you think about this as like a treatment team, a crisis management team. Everyone's involved. It could just be like, oh, their best friend is around and they could just like play games until they're feeling better. Okay, that's that person's role. So developing a plan, being all on the same page, if possible. I know that's not easy. And figuring out what role does everyone have. And if you are a caregiver, you're a parent, you are another loved one, I've been saying this a lot more lately. It is traumatic to have your kid hurt themselves, have history of hurting themselves, taking their own life. That's a trauma for you. Don't underestimate that. So you might be in fight or flight mode. You might run away. You might, try to pretend this is not happening. Oh, they're feeling better. Okay, I'm not going to talk about it, right? Pretend, go back to normal. Or you might get angry. If you can, try to avoid acting on those impulses, right? Especially don't berate them or scold them or shame them. Like, how could you do this to me? Don't you know what this is doing to me? You know, uh, yeah, all those just shaming and judgment. Like, if you do this, I will, if you hurt yourself, I will, take away the cart, right? Don't add. I know this is scary. So I know that a lot of what people say in these moments are just like in that heat of the moment and that fear. But if you can, don't shame them. You just say, thank you for telling me. I really appreciate it. This is really scary, but I'm here for you. Parents and other family members can really do a lot by staying physically nearby in high risk periods, or making sure that someone is around physically, right? And is able to restrict the means, make the environment safe, take away weapons, take away dangerous things, get them away from windows, and validating the pain, but not suicide and self-harm as the way to cope with that. As you don't have to validate that as a solution, right? This, like, parents have a really hard time, right? Because I've heard this a lot, and I totally get it. They're like, I don't want to say it makes sense that you're feeling this terrible from your breakup, because what if the validation makes them feel justified in like feeling it, and then they go and do something about it, you know? People worry that validating the emotion makes it more likely that they're going to act on that emotion in ways that are scary. But no, you don't have to say, I agree with everything you're doing or agree with everything you're saying. Be like, I get that you're in pain. I see that this is so hurtful for you. Point blank. That's all you need to say, right? Understand the problem and say, I get it. And then following that safety plan. Now, most families, especially parents, do not want to talk about a safety plan when everything's great, right? It is a bummer. It is it's a weird thing to be like, oh, if something happens to you, or if you're at risk, what should we do when there isn't a problem? But you're not going to want to think about that in the moment. You're not going to want to try to think on the spot and be a first responder and be like, okay, like they said this, but then they said, then they also had a breakup and they didn't sleep and they had a lot of Adderall. Like, oh, what do I do now? Make a plan in advance. Even if it's like, hey, this is a caregiver. Like, I know I'm a worrywart. I know I'm anxious. I can't help but think about the worst case scenario. I know that, you struggled with mental health or hurting yourself. And the thought of that happening is paralyzing. It would really help me and my anxiety if we can figure out what steps that we should take together to make sure that you're safe. Can we talk to your therapist about that? Can I speak to your therapist about that? What do you think, we should do? What would be the most helpful? So even starting the conversation, just saying, hey, it's just for me. I'm a worrywart. Just humor me. That might be enough to even just get a few steps of this is what I can do. And this is a script that I like. You say, I'm not mad at you. I'm really glad you told me that you're thinking of hurting yourself. I'm really glad you came to me to talk about this. So we're going to make tonight safer, and we're going to help with this pain, and we're going to figure it out together and figure out how it got this overwhelming. So let's figure this out together, okay? So I've learned so much from this conversation. It's taken a lot of things that I've already known, but really just, making it an actual plan and framing understanding the problem, getting on their side, validating their experience as parts of the strategy for how to keep someone safe. Not like, oh, casual chit chat, but then when, they're gonna cut themselves and we gotta get them, we gotta call 911, right? There's so many different things that you can do to make them feel heard, make them feel seen, make them feel not alone, make them feel understood about why they got to the point where they were so desperate that hurting themselves or taking their own life felt like the only option. I hope this was helpful. I know this is a really tough thing to talk about, and I know that not everything I said today or said here is going to apply to you. Right? I know that every situation's different. I highly encourage conversations among everyone involved. Again, the family system. Talk to the teachers, talk to their friends, talk to their doctors, right? And you can be really upfront about that. Instead of saying, oh, like, I'm going to keep this a secret, I'm not going to tell dad, you'd be like, listen, I really want to understand how we can talk about this in a way that, you feel like your privacy is protected. Let's say that privacy is protected, but I want to be able to have open conversations so that you trust me. But this is a big problem. This pain from this breakup is a big problem, and I want to think through this together. You're not alone. And let's figure out how we can all help with this problem together. So, again, I hope this is helpful. If you are in California and are um, looking for a therapist for an adolescent or teen or even family with suicidality, self-harm, or just extreme emotion regulation, definitely check out Dr. Marcus Rodriguez at the Youth and Family Institute. But if you are a loved one of someone who is struggling with suicidality and big emotions, and you feel helpless and you want more of this like hands-on, how do I help them? That's where I come in. Kulamind, KULAMIND.com. It's where I just teach like this, but I teach, how to apply what I just talked about, these skills, to your situation. So thank you all. And if this was helpful, please send this to anyone who needs to hear it. The more you spread this information, the more we could get on the same page with helping the person in need. And leave us 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you have questions, leave it in the comments, especially if you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify. I love talking to all of you. So I'll see you next week. Thank you. By accessing this podcast, you acknowledge that the host of this podcast makes no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information purposes only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast and any and all content or services available on or through this podcast are provided for general, non-commercial informational purposes only, and do not constitute the practice of any medical or any professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment, and should not be considered or used as a substitute for the independent professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment of a duly licensed and qualified healthcare provider. In case of a medical emergency, you should immediately call 911. The host does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast. And information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement. Thank you.